Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke. I'm hosting this satsang. I have followed Ramana Maharshi for about 30 years. I took satsang for many years with Nomi of Sat in Santa Cruz. Upon retirement, my wife and I moved to Tiruvannamalai, home to Ramana Ashram. We lived there for 8 years. Now live in Mexico. I've offered this kind of satsang for more than 10 years. I'm just a seeker, just like you. I have been blessed with many years of deep teaching and practice. We share what we love. That's why I offer these satsangs. This is a Ramana Maharshi self-knowledge satsang. Since self-knowledge is what brings self-realization, the deep experiential knowledge of your own existence. So I say, be always free and at peace. Now we will continue with our review of Ramana's first book, Who Am I? We are on paragraph 8 of the all-text version, the only version edited by Ramana. Ramana's words: by a steady and continuous investigation into the nature of mind, the mind is transformed into that to which the I refers, and that is in fact the self. The mind has to necessarily depend on, for its existence, on something gross that never subsists by itself. It is the mind that is otherwise called the subtle body, ego, jiva, or soul. The first sentence reminds me of a yoga teaching on the mind, that the mind becomes what it focuses upon. Focus the mind on that being, existence, the self, and the mind will become that. Ramana calls for more than just mental focus. He calls for a steady and continuous investigation. The trouble is that the mind grasps only the objective. That's all it can know. And that, the self, is never objective. Focus the mind on the non-objective, and it loses the basis of the objective. To focus the mind on the non-objective, Ramana taught self-inquiry. Self-inquiry uses the mind to move past the mind. Ancient Taoists call this turning around the light of consciousness. The seeker is often also told how to practice by a steady and continuous investigation. He does not say to wait for self-realization to come. He does not say that it's in the hands of the gods or fate. The seeker is directed to practice by a steady and continuous investigation. For practice to be steady, It has to be deeper than the mind. The mind cannot hold anything steady for long. This practice is deeper than a few minutes each day at a usual time and place. This extends through what can be called daily life. Ramana also equates the mind with the ego or jiva, the individual self. He says that the mind is just another name for ego. What is the mind? Just a bundle of thoughts. What is the ego? It's really just a thought, and a very specific one. The first thought, the sense of individuality, the sense of I am this body. Eliminate all thoughts and the ego never rises. How do you eliminate all thoughts? Ramana advised self-inquiry to look into the source of the I thought. Ramana taught that all other thoughts depend on this I thought. Eliminate this thought and all other thoughts are also eliminated. How do you eliminate the ego? Discover that it never existed to begin with, that it's just an illusion, an assumption that you have never really challenged. Now for some ideas for practice. What is your practice like? Do you meditate daily, or do you let your ego run your practice? With daily practice, one often finds that the inquiry starts happening in other times and places, and that a kind of self-inquiry current gets going. This is a very good step. Does your inquiry extend to other parts of daily life? Do you inquire in your dreams, in the midst of activity, when walking or driving? Do you try to know what is always still when your body is moving? Your being is always. You just don't notice it. Instead, you notice all the many things that you are conscious of. You don't notice the consciousness within which everything rises and sets. So now to our videos for the week. First is Swami Sarva Priyananda. This dynamic young Swami is the head of the New York Vedanta Society, and he will talk in the video that we'll play in a moment, how to know the knower.
Thank you, Anirban. So the question is, what exactly do you mean by enlightenment when you're trying to focus on the awareness? Yes? Okay, and then we cut it off? All right, Anirban, thank you. I'll be answering your question now. Now, if we try to understand the awareness which is illumining everything else, we are again falling into the same trap of objectifying it, trying to be the one who tries to understand the one who is understanding. You'll never do that. What you can do, and what the goal of Vedanta is, when you realize yourself to be that consciousness which is illumining our minds, and through our minds and bodies the external world. When you know that, this consciousness, and suppose here is the body and here is the mind, a nebulous mass above it, whatever. Here is the body.
Speak a little louder.
And here is the mind. And here is the consciousness which is shining upon the mind and through the mind into the body. Now, all we have to do is to acknowledge that we are this. Remember, the I, which is also a thought in the mind, it now refers to the mind and the body. It should refer to the pure consciousness. And not as an object, as you yourself. So you will know yourself as not the body, not the mind. It's almost impossible to express it in language, and yet when it happens, it's absolutely clear. There is no vagueness about it. As Shankaracharya puts it, Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. I am not, the famous hymn where he sings Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. I am consciousness, bliss, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. There, at the beginning, the first line is, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect, I am not even the ego sense, the I. Look at the paradox of this statement. I am not the I. Ahankara naham. I am not the intellect which is trying to understand all this. I am not that too. Then, after denying this, he says, I am not the sense organs. Nacha shrotra jivve, nacha ghrana netri. I am not the ears, not the eyes, not the sense of smell or taste. And he says, I am not the physical body or the mind made up of 5 elements. Na bhumir, na tejo, na vayu, na apo. I am not the 5 elements also. Then only he says, Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. I am that consciousness which pervades and enlivens this body-mind system. So that is we can call it an intuitive experience, an acknowledgement of what we are, literally the word realization is very good. A realization of what we are. It sort of dawns upon you that what you are. Yes.
Now we will listen to Rupert Spira. Rupert is one of the best at explaining the meaning behind Ramana's teachings. And here he will talk about awareness cannot know itself as an object.
He was kind of posed like the question, can he be aware of awareness? It was like to say, can the eyeball see itself? Or can the edge of a blade cut itself? And so for me, the answer was, well, clearly no. So when I listened carefully to the dialogue you're having here, which was really helpful, when you get to the point when you say, are you aware? I think in my head, I'm going, well, I sort of close my eyes and I find something object, like it's a buzzing, a vibration, or it is the flowers, or it is something else. And in my head, it's like, well, because there's an object that I'm aware of, therefore I must be aware. That's why I say yes.
No.
No. That's what I thought. So maybe you can help me with that one.
You think that you are really experiencing the flower and that from it you are deducing awareness. In fact, you are experiencing awareness and deducing the flower.
So when you say, like, are you aware of the flowers? In my experience of that question is,
well,
yeah. Oh,
sorry, can I just pounce
Please
on
do.
you?
Please do.
You think you're aware of the flower.
Yeah.
But are you sure that you're aware of the flower, or are you just aware of your perception of the flower?
My perception of the flower that I'm aware of.
Okay. So you're aware of your perception of the flower,
Yeah.
not the flower.
Precisely.
So if you're aware of the perception of the flower, but not the flower itself, how do you know that the perception that you are aware of is a perception of a flower. You don't. So you can only say, I'm aware of my perception.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say legitimately, I'm aware of my perception of the flower, because you've never experienced the flower. You've only experienced your perception.
Yeah, my whole
Okay.
life has been experiencing perception.
Okay. So now you say, I'm aware of my perception, or I am knowing my perception.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Can we change to the word knowing? It makes it easier.
sure.
You are knowing your perception, or you're aware of your perception. Yeah. Now, do you ever find something called perception in the absence of the knowing of it?
No.
So are you sure that you are knowing your perception, and rather than just knowing the knowing of it? You agree that you're not sure that you're having a perception of a flower, you're just knowing your perception.
Yes.
Now I'm asking you to take a further step back.
Yeah.
Are you sure that you're knowing a perception and not just knowing knowing? What is there to your perception other than the knowing of it? The awareness of it. If you were to touch the stuff that perception is made of,
Yeah.
do you find anything there other than the knowing of it or the awareness of it?
No, it's just the knowing of the awareness of it.
It's just the knowing of it. But are you sure it's the knowing of it? Given that you said you don't ever find, just like you couldn't find the flower, you can only find the perception.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's the knowing of the perception and not just knowing?
I'm not sure.
But okay, try now to have a perception without the awareness of it or the knowing of it.
I can't. You know.
Could you ever have a perception without the awareness of it?
No.
So are you sure there is something called perception independent of knowing or awareness? No, obviously not.
Yeah.
So go again to the experience of a perception. Is there anything there, if you were to try to touch the stuff that perception is made of? Something is there, yes, it's not nothing.
Yeah.
Something is there. Is there anything there apart from knowing or experiencing?
The only thing there is experience.
The only thing there is experience.
Yeah.
And all there is to experience is knowing.
Yeah.
So,
I see where you're going.
so not only
Yeah.
is it possible, to experience, for awareness to experience itself in the absence of objects, even during the apparent presence of objects, awareness is only experiencing itself. All there is to experience is knowing, and it is knowing that knows that knowing. So in our experience, nobody has ever or could ever experience anything other than consciousness. Is anybody here now experiencing anything other than the knowing of their experience? Has anyone here ever had an experience of anything other than the knowing of experience? Or could anyone here ever experience anything other than the knowing or the consciousness of experience? Obviously not. How do we know there is something other than this stuff called knowing? We don't.
Yeah.
Why do you think physicists have been looking for this stuff called matter, which is supposedly the stuff that exists outside consciousness, for 2,500 years? It's not there. All there is in experience, or the only substance present in experience, is knowing or consciousness. And consciousness is always one seamless, intimate, indivisible whole, with no parts, no objects, no selves, no distinctions. And all of this is made out of that, and that is what we are.
So if there's just knowing, it almost harkens back to his question, then how can there be knowing of? Or if there's just awareness, how can there be awareness of?
You're right. The knowing of,
Yeah.
what we are aware of, is always a concept added by thought.
Okay, that's helpful.
Remember, again,
Yeah.
let's go back to Mary and Jane, just to be simple. Mary falls asleep in Burlingame. She dreams that she's Jane on the streets of New York.
Yep.
Jane thinks she's seeing a multiplicity and diversity of objects and selves made out of stuff called matter. In other words, made out of stuff that is other than herself. And she thinks that she's seeing 10,000 things on the streets of New York. Mary wakes up. What was the stuff out of which the 10,000 things seemed to be made, really made of?
Just consciousness.
Mary's indivisible, single mind. It was her own single, indivisible mind that appeared to itself through the agency of Jane as a multiplicity and diversity of objects. Now, could it be that we are now having a kind of waking dream, and that what appears from the point of view of each of our bodies to be a multiplicity and diversity of objects is in fact all made out of the single, infinite, indivisible stuff called consciousness, or God's infinite being, or the common name for it, I. And when I pose that question, could it be, check out your experience. Is that not consistent with our experience? Nobody here has ever or could ever experience anything other than the knowing of experience. Knowing is the only substance that anyone has ever found. When I say anyone has ever found, I don't mean that people experience knowing. It is knowing that knows only knowing. As the Sufis say, there is only God's face.
Yeah, I follow you. So somebody's having a really good dream. Yeah, no, that helps. It leaves me in a place of, it satisfies the question in one respect. It leaves me in a place of mystery, but it's a very good place to be, if I could use that word. So where going back to the original question, though, where did these sayings like the eye can't see itself and the blade can't cut itself, those I think came from non-dual teachings?
It means, yes. Well, they either, two possibilities. One, they come from teachers who haven't recognized the essential nature of their own mind, and therefore say it's not possible to know awareness. That's one possibility. Or, in which case the statement is not true. But it could also come from a true understanding, in which it is said awareness can't know itself, by which it means, by which the person means awareness can't know itself as an object. Awareness can't know itself in the way that the mind usually knows the objects of experience. In just the same way that, can the sun shine on itself? The sun can shine on the planets, it can shine on the earth, but the sun cannot shine on itself. But does that mean that the sun is not illuminated?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was exactly during your meditation, your talk, when you said that, I was like, hold on, because it caught me right where, in the middle of this inquiry.
But would you agree that the sun illuminates itself?
Absolutely, yeah.
So in this metaphor, the sun is consciousness, and the sun illuminates itself by itself, just like consciousness knows itself by itself.
Okay.
But the sun is too close to itself to turn round on itself and shine on itself like it shines on the earth. But just because it's too close to itself to turn round and shine on itself, that doesn't mean that it is not illuminating itself. It is illuminating itself. Just by being itself, it illuminates itself. Now, consciousness, you're quite right, is too close to itself. It cannot attend to itself. Remember, attention, attendere, to stretch towards. You can't, just like you can't stand up and take a step towards yourself because you're too close to yourself. Consciousness is too close to itself to know itself in subject-object relationship.
Right.
It cannot attend or stretch itself towards itself.
Yeah.
Just like the sun cannot shine its light on itself. But it doesn't need to. Because just by being itself, the sun illuminates itself.
Okay, that's exactly where I need to be. And I think that's, to me, that's an intuitive explanation of those sayings.
Yes. So yes,
Yeah.
when it says awareness cannot know itself like the eyes cannot see themselves, what is meant in the best of these cases is awareness cannot know itself in subject-object relationship in the way the mind normally knows the objects of experience.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it cannot know itself through a different channel, through a unique channel. This unique experience, this objectless experience, the knowing of our own being.
Yeah.
Awareness is knowing of itself.
So to use those silly, saying the eye can't see itself, but it could know it's seeing, and the knife can't cut itself, but it could know it's cutting.
Well, I would drop these sayings because they're not very efficient. They don't upgrade your
I got you.
your phrases to the sun, because the sun cannot shine its light on itself, but at the same time it does illuminate itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's a better metaphor than the eyes or the razor blade.
I concur. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
And now we will listen to Nomi. And with Nomi, meditate along with him. He wants you to experience what he's talking about. Experience it, not just think about it. Here, this video is supremely simple.
The self is supremely simple. It is supremely simple inasmuch as the nature of being is entirely non-objective. Therefore, the realization of the self is utterly transcendent of all kinds of perception pertaining to the senses, and all kinds of conception, any permutation of thought pertaining to the mind. The realization of the single, simple, indivisible truth is always a matter of identity. To reveal this for those seeking liberation from the imagined bondage of misidentification, the Upanishads declare by way of instruction, Tattvamasi, that you are. To point out the very substance of this realization, the Upanishads declare Prajnana Brahma. Supreme knowledge is Brahman. Or we may say, consciousness itself is Brahman. To reveal what it is that is to be realized, the Upanishads declare, I am Atma Brahman. This self is Brahman. And to indicate experience, they declare, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. The purpose of these Mahavakyas, great aphorisms, and other instruction. Indeed, the purpose of the entirety of spiritual instruction is the realization of the self. That is, what your nature actually is. All that is necessary is a profound inquiry. Who am I? As the Maharshi has taught, primary in this inquiry, to know yourself, it is imperative that you abide free of misidentification with the body. This is inclusive of falsely defining yourself in terms of any bodily attribute, bodily quality, bodily activity, bodily conditions such as life and death. Free of the body, what are you? Can you be measured in time and space? Free of the body, what becomes of the so-called perception of the world in multiplicity? If you are not the body, what are you? And where is bondage? What would be the cause of suffering? Suffering seems to be there, the experience, as long as you regard yourself as bound. What else is bondage but ignorance? And ignorance in any form is just the many flavors of misidentification, confusing what is not yourself with what you actually are. Such confusion is only in the mind. It is the mind's imagination. So it is imperative for the realization of the simple truth of your being to abide free from the superimposition of whatever is conceived upon yourself. That is, cease to regard anything that is constituted of thought as being your nature. If you are free of the mind, what state do you have? Do you wake? Do you dream? Do you sleep? To be free of every state of mind is also to be free of the content of those states. The dreaming state is all the dreaming character and the character's experience, the dreaming world, and so forth and so on. Similar is it with the waking state. If you are not the mind, what is thought? If you are not the mind, how will you conceive of a distance between yourself and supreme knowledge? Or where will you keep your ignorance? The very assumption of existing as an individual entity or ego should be inquired into. What is it that constitutes I? Who is it that says or thinks, I? If you inquire into the nature of the apparently individualized self, the individuality, being unreal, will entirely vanish. Then there is no seed from which misidentification can sprout. That is, there is no cause for ignorance and consequently no effect of illusion. What remains is that which has existed always and has alone existed. That which is a product of imagination has no actual existence at all. So that when bondage is destroyed, when ignorance is destroyed, nothing real has been destroyed. When the ego has died, no one has really died. And when the truth is realized, when the realization is gained, nothing has actually been acquired. For whom would there be bondage and liberation, loss and gain? That which you are can never be thought of. It is entirely non-objective, just pure being, consciousness, bliss. It is without birth and without destruction. For it, nothing is created. And for it, nothing disappears. That which you are can never be conceived. Being such, how could any idea that you are different from it, or separated from it, or that there is an obstruction between you and that, how can such ideas survive? How could they possibly have even an iota of truth in them? Using the end itself as the means, inquire deeply as to who you are. And the self knows itself. Brahman knows Brahman, for this self is Brahman. I am Atma Brahman. Free of misidentification, abide in the knowledge of yourself, with the self-evident wisdom that declares that you cannot possibly be otherwise.
And now we will take a few minutes to meditate, to inquire. And first, just notice that you exist. You exist, and you know that you exist, and that knowledge does not depend on the senses or the mind. It's deeper than either. Then inquire, investigate within yourself. Who knows the self? Can the not self know the self? Now look to your own identity and ask, who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right. Now we're going to close with a short chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more resources for you. A free book site that includes the book that this series is based on, Who Am I with Comments, a YouTube site that has many videos of Nomi, and my blog that mainly has stories of our life in India. The URLs will be on the screen next. There will be more of these satsangs in the coming weeks as we continue with this series based on the Ramana book, Who Am I? Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you. Now the URLs, and I'll leave them on the screen for a few seconds, so maybe you can copy them if you're interested. Thank you for joining today.